Hello everyone and welcome to Tabor Talk. Again, I keep repeating myself that my theme song, my logo, I have my logo and I do have my theme song. It's just working on, oops, there's a commercial here, just working on embedding it into the video itself. I'll have it by the end of the week, promise, 100%. I know everyone's looking forward to this. But anyway, guerrilla style format, guerrilla style video, Tabor Talk, spontaneous, totally unscripted, no notes at all. Okay, just here I am on my porch, my cabin, having a conversation with you people, just hanging out with you people here on Tabor Talk. So, okay, I'm going to do another video on Trump. I want to sort of limit this Trump stuff because it becomes tiresome. I've done a couple of videos comparing Trump to Hitler, and people think I'm doing this to be outrageous. I am not. Okay, there are very real similarities between Nazi Germany and the rise of Hitler and Trump's administration. Now, to be fair, there's no way I could explain this and do a good job on conveying this to you people on this YouTube video. Even if this was an hour long, there's just no way. Or 2 hours or 3 hours. You have to do some research. This is complicated, complex stuff. Now, there are some things that are super obvious. You go, oh my God, that's the same fucking hit. You know, like I talked about how back in, but this is just a social, cultural thing, but the comparison of, Hitler, people in Germany, pre-Hitler, they thought this Hitler thing was a joke. It was just like the same sort of thing. They didn't take him seriously. And here, Charlie Chaplin made a movie, The Great Dictator, on Hitler, a little mustache. No one took him seriously. He was a buffoon, just like Trump. But there are other serious things, but I just want to point that up. So, for starters, let me do this. I could direct you to websites, and there are at least a half a dozen books that you can get on Amazon which are pretty good. Scholarly works on Hitler's rise and the Trump phenomenon and all that. But let me just show you this here. This is a leading Holocaust historian who compares the U.S. to Nazi Germany. Let me just show you this. Okay, so his name is Zach Beauchamp. Okay, he's a Holocaust historian. Take a look at this. So go to Google this. I know Vox is liberal and on the left. I do get that. But there's a great article on Vox. So just type in a leading Holocaust historian, U.S. to Nazi Germany. Okay? So that's number one. Okay, read that article. I'm not going to read it here in this post, but now what I'm going to do is going to play you a clip of Andrew Sullivan, who's a conservative. Andrew Sullivan is a conservative. He had a conversation with Sam Harris. This was actually before the election, before 2016, and he was talking about this Hitler and Trump, and he was like, "Thank God he's not going to win." At the time, no one thought that he would actually win, and he does a great job of explaining it. So again, I just want to repeat, I'm not being outrageous by saying there are comparisons between Trump and Hitler. Okay, so let me go here and I'll talk a little bit afterwards. Okay, so this is Andrew Sullivan and Sam Harris on his podcast when it was Waking Up, and they're talking about Trump right before the election. So here we go. Let me turn up the volume. My volume is completely off. I'm going to turn the volume up. And here we go. And by the way, in this podcast, he was talking about Hillary Clinton for the first hour, how awful a candidate she was. And the name of the podcast is The Lesser Evil. Now, here he goes with Trump. Ready?
Well, let me get back to Trump and why he's a particular danger. And it has really less to do with policy than with his core political instincts. He is a man,
or even just his core. I mean, like
his core.
Let's just talk.
Let me just pause that for 1 second. There's no video, so I'm just going to hold the phone down, and you could look at my handsome face for a half hour. Okay. All right, let me go back.
Talk about Trump the man.
Well, Trump the man is someone who has no understanding of a non-zero sum engagement, and this is, I think, part of his core. And liberal democracy and a free market and a free society are absolutely dependent on the notion that we can do things together and you win and I win at the same time. And even if we don't, in the particular instance, win over someone else, we know that in the long run, what we're doing will make all of us better. And so that ability to actually understand a non-zero sum engagement and how win-win can happen is crucial to the survival of liberal democracy. He has no concept of it. This is why he doesn't understand trade. His only understanding is I win, you lose. He goes further, and the only way he can be psychically at peace is when he is mastering and dominating another individual. There's only one way in which a country can exist in the world, and that is by mastering and dominating other countries. This psyche that's profoundly at odds with the very character that is required to sustain Western civilization is what is so dangerous about him. So you see that it's a typical democratic institution that people can heckle, stand up and protest a speech. And the proper thing for a democratic politician to say is, when the crowd roars disapproval of this disruptor, to say, hold on a minute, this person has a right to say, let's give them their moment. Now, if they're disruptive, you can have them taken out. But there's a moment where you say, everybody listen, we live in a free society, this person deserves to have their say, and that's part of the to and fro. You've seen Obama do it a million times. Every politician, time from it. No, Trump says this person is disgusting. I would like to punch him in the face. I'd like to see him carried out on a stretcher. Similarly, if you take the question of a free press, which again, no politician likes. In the moment, they're taking him down or her down, that they're throwing barbs. He regards that function as something disgusting. And he singles them out in these rounds. These are disgusting, awful, disgusting people. This process is wrong. He actually thinks that satire should be prevented. He wants SNL to be taken off the air because of lèse-majesté against him. This is an attitude that's utterly incompatible with a free society. You can see this in his attitudes again to women. It's and you can see it. The only interaction is one in which he controls and owns and dominates a woman. Not that he treats that person as an equal. He can't, because that would mean he is psychologically incredibly disturbed when he has to deal with people as equals. He just can't. That's why he has no friends.
He's obviously, I mean, he really does present a kind of clinical case study in at least a few problems. I mean, he's obviously a narcissist, again, in the clinical sense. I mean, the way he reacts to slights against him, his character, or it's just, it's pathological. It's not just bad style. It's not just unpresidential. It is, he cannot resist his impulse to do what is obviously not in his best interest.
Yep.
And would certainly not be in the interest of the country.
There's also a real psychological panic he has. And this will probably rub you off the wrong way, but he's a pagan. He has no conception that the weak have any status in our society. He only understands strength. Now, if you think of Christianity as I would in its best sense, its core sense, one of the core insights of Jesus, one of the most counterintuitive insights of Jesus, was that if someone hits you on the one cheek, turn around and offer him the other. If someone does something wrong to you, be good to him. If someone does something to you horribly, 1,000 times, let them do it again. And Trump's position is if someone gives you the slightest insult, you have to hit back 1,000 times more. He's not just not Christian, as is clearly the case. He's anti-Christian. I mean, he's like something out of Game of Thrones. He has no capacity. That's why he has no compunction in mocking the weak. I mean, I don't know about you, Sam, but I've never seen someone in my entire life. I've never been around someone who's seen someone disabled and openly mocks them. for their disability?
Isn't the
That was
Trump
repulsive.
crowd's defense of that is that he mocks people that way in general, so it wasn't actually specifically targeting this
Right.
disabled
I heard that.
reporter?
Yes, but nonetheless, let's say you mock all sorts of people. There is a distinction between mocking people who are powerful, which is a completely legitimate thing, and mocking people for idiocy.
That was a New York
But mocking
Times reporter, by the
people
way.
for
I'll shut up.
vulnerabilities that they cannot change.
He's so obviously a bully, and the fact that his bullying plays well to so many millions of people is really disturbing, because
Then there's also a profound recklessness about the man.
Yep.
His narcissism is so great that if challenged, he will bring anything down around him. He has no loyalty to the system or any
100%.
institutions outside of himself. And you see this in his financial dealings too. The constant lying, the stiffing of people, the tearing up of contracts, the treatment of simple obligations to one's fellow human beings that have to instantly be sacrificed, and then the ability, for example, to get into such amazing debt through such reckless spending, and then to be in such debt that he himself is too big to fail and the banks have to bail him out, and then to treat that as a success afterwards. I mean, this is pathological. I mean, this is a man also utterly out of control. It's something really bizarre about the impulse to get back control or take back control, as Brexit had, or control your borders or control the society or control these forces, to hand over power to someone who has no control over himself. We've never seen this. I mean, it's such an outlier in terms of human behavior.
he's an outlier in a way that I've spoken about before on the podcast, and I just want to talk about it a little bit more, because not that many people talk about what is so strange about his speech, and there are very few people who find it as disturbing as I do, but I want to just bounce some of this off you, because I mean, this is actually what I find most disturbing about him. So we've talked about how all politicians lie, and I actually think that they should pay much more of a price for this than they do. But there's something about Trump's lies that are of a totally different character. And I mean, so to take one example, I recall from, I think it was the second debate, where Anderson Cooper brought up his tweeting about the sex tape for the pageant contestant that doesn't exist. Like he tweeted out, go find her sex tape. And Trump said didn't happen, right? He just said didn't happen. Now, there's not a person on either side of the aisle. I mean, there's not a person in Trump's camp who didn't know about this tweet, right? I mean, it absolutely happened. That part was not disputable, right? He tweeted, "Go look for the sex tape," and yet he said, "Didn't happen."
I didn't
right?
do it.
Right.
Well, last night when it was brought up that he had mocked the looks of the women that he'd assaulted,
Right. Yeah.
and then said, "Didn't do that.
Yeah.
I didn't do that." And at some point, you realize that the people watching it, even his supporters, must know, right? That he's denying in front of millions of people something that we know, we can prove to be true.
I mean, but that's not a lie. I mean, that's not even a lie. That's the thing. There's something so childish about this that is terrifying.
It's also a big lie. I mean, it's such a massive lie.
Yeah, but it's I just want to get at what's behind this lie, because it's either a total unawareness that you're in dialogue with other sentient creatures who have memories and who have logical expectations, or it is just a total shamelessness. Because what you're doing is you're totally disregarding what is inevitably going to be going on in the minds of the people you're talking to. They all saw the tweet. How can you say it didn't happen?
Because I think in his mind, there's only, are you with me or against me? There's no other paradigm in which he understands reality. So he's demanding in the way that someone like Hitler demanded, or that Mussolini demanded, that you actually, it's a lie, but you support him anyway.
Right.
That's the key thing. Yeah. And that you willingly see this as an act of power, not in any way related to truth or reality. And that's what you're worshiping. You're worshiping someone's mastery over yourself, and you're feeling a kind of relief and release in supporting somebody who can make this lie, who is telling you, I will create reality for you.
I think you're giving him too much credit in terms of any of that being thought out. I think he really is much more of a child than
Yep.
that. He's not Goebbels. He's not somebody who has thought this through and is calibrating his speech to the moral sentiments and panic of his audience. He is someone who can't do other than he's doing. I mean, so there's the line is one thing, but this is what I have commented about before.
I'm
on my
sure
podcast,
people
but
you
there's
people know,
something
but
about the
Joseph Goebbels
vacuousness of
was
his
the
speech. The fact that he can say
Hitler's
something
propaganda
3
person.
times
I'll
and
shut
it was
up.
meaningless the first time, right? Well, like the lack of information content when he begins talking. But he'll say something like, and this, I guess this is also a lie. He'll say something like, he said this in the last 2 debates, when his sexual assaults and indiscretions were brought up, his response is, nobody respects women more than I do. Nobody, right?
That I did actually get a round of laughter last night, I'm happy to say.
But I mean,
because it's the only...
what does he think he's doing there? It's like, so I mean, just on his
Well,
face.
it's interesting here, Sam, to go back to the Clinton lies. Let's because here we do have 2 liars, but
Yeah.
but the word liar doesn't capture the difference here, right?
No.
There's an obviously self-serving Machiavellian way in which we lie to cover our ass and to protect ourselves and to get through a situation. We all do that, whether we like to admit it or not. We're not all saints. This is a very human thing. This is a different level of asserting that reality itself has to be under my mastery. That's what I get from it, that he has to always be in control. And so if reality is telling him he's not, then he has to simply be able to deny the reality, and he has to.
I also just think it's stupidity. I think he's actually not very smart. The problem is he can't deal with the cognitive overhead required to actually lie successfully. Yep. I mean, I think he lies about everything, and so some of his lies are successful. But in these cases, when he's in extremis, he can't do the arithmetic to figure out how can I push back against this charge that I don't want to admit to in a way that will be credible and it won't obviously be a lie, right? So he just can't do the math. But the other thing about his speech, and this isn't really narrowly focused on lying, it's the information poverty of it.
Exactly.
I view someone's speech as, it's almost like one of those 3D tours you have of a house or of a hotel room or, of a conference center where you get online and you want to see what this place looks like. And you can move around in the space, you can turn around, you can see basically everything. That's what a person's speech is like. You see basically what's in the space of their mind. You see what's connected to what. You see what's not there. And given the way he speaks, we know a tremendous amount about his mind, and there's very little in there, right? Has he ever read a book?
I know, that's the truth. I've said that over and over.
Read a book in the last 30 years. He cannot be a reader, given the way he talks. And I
blogged about that and people laughed at me.
He knows almost nothing
that's
relevant to being the president of the United States.
That's right.
And yet, obviously, 40% of the American electorate doesn't seem to care about that.
Exactly. It's crazy.
Again, one has to explain this somehow, right? And I do think it's the classic route of support for dictatorships. To surrender one's own entire possibility of self-government and thinking about reality for yourself to this person's will to power, and it's staggering. By the way, I mean, I saw last night that if you go back to 2012, after the election of 2012, he said it was fixed, it was rigged, that the whole thing was a sham, that we should have a revolution.
Given the way that he has been,
he will do that, Sam. We've got to figure this out.
You take the moment in the debate last night where obviously the Trump people think this is being blown entirely out of proportion. The moment where he said he wouldn't necessarily concede his defeat, or he'll keep us in suspense. He'll have to see at the time, and they're drawing an invidious comparison between that and what Gore did in contesting the election with the Supreme Court. I mean, what is so different here, and I don't know if we want to talk about the details of what Gore did, but what is so different here is that for months, Trump has been stoking the mob with fears about the illegitimacy of our electoral process based on nothing, right? Based on nothing but conspiracy theories.
Again, this is before the election.
He's preparing his followers to react badly and even violently to defeat. So for him to stand on that stage last night and say, I don't know if I'm going to accept, I'll have to see at the time, that was just a Chavez level undemocratic moment.
He hates democracy. It means that he sometimes will have to lose. There's a reason he likes Putin, because the only way he can conceive of democracy is the way Putin conceives of the democracy, as a completely Potemkin thing that simply empowers him, and in which he's in control. That's why he likes Putin, because he wants to be Putin, and it's the only way of governing that he truly understands.
Some people are going to immediately recoil at that claim. Obviously, comparisons to him and between him and Hitler, or even a lesser figure.
I think the Hitler comparison is absolutely on. I really do. I
I
know
told
that
you.
it's at this point been completely devalued, and it's one reason we should never have cried wolf before. Right. But I don't think I'm thinking of a contemporary analogy in which someone is running in a democracy on the principle that the democracy itself is so corrupt it must be undone or renewed by a single cult leader figure. This is very Weimar.
Yeah.
It's extremely Weimar. He's now said that he said and argued and still has not really recanted, that the current president was illegitimate because he was not a citizen. He's said in advance now that Hillary Clinton should not have been allowed to run for president because she's allegedly part of a criminal conspiracy. So there is none of these institutions have any legitimacy for him. None of them.
Let's just take a second to try to rehabilitate the comparison to Hitler, because again, you have lost the argument famously the moment you invoke Hitler or the Nazis. But
I know, right?
It is worth reflecting on how consistently Hitler was underestimated. I mean, he was treated the way most of us have been treating Trump, as a buffoon, as a clown, as somebody
Isn't that what I said?
Couldn't do much damage because he's obviously the forces of reason are going to prevail at the end of the day in the face of this kind of guy.
They made fun of the way he looked. They made fun of his hair. Right? Look at Trump. He's a ridiculous figure. I mean, by any stretch of the imagination, from the stupid orange straight man to the ridiculous absurd hair to all of this. He's absolutely.
He's not looking as
clown.
orange lately, though, right?
Forget that's what everybody said about Hitler. It's what everybody said about Mussolini, and they do look ridiculous. Chaplin made a movie making fun of him.
See, I talked about that
character. But if you campaign actively, if you whip up, especially if you're touching these racial and in-group, out-group feelings, and when you have consistently argued that the entire system is itself illegitimate, and then you get to power, and you get to power not because you won him. Hitler's ceiling was 37%, but the conservative traditional forces thought he could be used. They liked the support that his followers brought into the broad right-wing movement. Hindenburg thought he could be manipulated, made a figurehead. They didn't take him seriously.
Well, that is what has been so irresponsible about the rest of the Republican establishment, the way they have enabled him. And
I know. I've talked about this a lot.
The appeasement.
I mean, it's beyond disgraceful. I mean, you think that their egos wouldn't allow for this kind of this lickspittle approach to his ascent, but when you look at people like Paul Ryan and Ted Cruz going against him, and then now working the phone banks for him, I mean it's incredible behavior where you have someone like Mitt Romney who's a standout now. It's like the one guy with a spine gives a speech, I don't know when it was, maybe 8 months ago, saying this guy is totally unqualified to be president. I mean, Mitt Romney looks like a saint at this point.
They're all Hindenburgs at this point.
Yep.
And they're terrified. The reason they're not taking him on even
Sycophants,
now
toadies, same
is because
shit.
they're terrified that their own voters
Mitch McConnell, all of them.
I mean, you look at his economics, okay? Free trade and the debt. These are things that the Republican hardcore caucus, the Freedom Caucus, the top 100 right-wing people who had ideological litmus tests and purity up the wazoo. This man has completely destroyed any of their economic, let alone their debt fixation. But none of them, in fact, they all have to support him. Why? Because their own voters are supporting him, and they are terrified that if they turn on him, the voters will turn on them. And once you see that moment when they're too frightened of their followers to act, then you realize how terrifying this would be were he to win. Because were he to win, almost certainly the House and the Senate would be with him. Almost certainly, then he would be able to shape the Supreme Court. There would be no institutional resistance except the Republican Party itself, which has shown itself to be incapable of resisting. So that's where this is deeply dangerous. And let me point out, I just want to put this scenario out there because I think it hasn't been put out there before. And we are at war. And the war could get worse. In fact, his very election, I think, would provoke a wave of jihadist terrorism. Now, what would his response to that be? I think there's no question that the Constitution as we've known it would be in tatters overnight. This is a man who has openly advocated the torture of prisoners of war. He's openly advocated the mass murder of civilians. He's advocated the killing of the families of terrorists.
But what's confusing about this for his supporters is he's also advocated an isolationism that makes Hillary look like the warmonger, right? He's insisted that he was against the Iraq War, even though that's at best ambiguous. But he's advocated a retreat from the world. I mean, basically, he just wants to build a wall and hunker down, if you take him in at least most of his moods. And many of the people who support him and who supported Sanders, frankly, this is music to their ears. We don't need to be the world's cop. We don't need to be in the Middle East. Those people are barbarians who are never going to understand that democracy is a good thing. Let's just make our country great again, right? That's the promise.
Except he's not consistent on that because he wants to destroy ISIS, by which he means
5 minutes.
Presumably a Putin-level bombing campaign.
Or maybe a nuclear one. Why can't we use our nukes? We've got them. Shouldn't we be using them?
What this does, and again, what you have to understand, we always project from our current situation and think things continue as they do. No, these kind of movements seize upon events. The events change our reality, and the emotions that can be summoned up and manipulated in these processes. The mass emotions, especially when we have no elite controlling media anymore, when it's completely free fire zone, is incredibly dangerous. I mean, here's another thing I would point out. You know, there was a story about business leaders who don't support Trump in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago. And none of them would go on the record. Why? Because they all feared personal retribution. And we all know it.
Just incredibly craven.
It's craven. On the other hand, it's also clear that he would do that. I mean, he's talked about the presidency as someone who call up the head of a company. I mean, he would do the equivalent of bills of attainder on individuals and dissenters. He's threatened the owner of the Washington Post with using the antitrust regulations to go after him if the Washington Post opposes him. I mean, this is completely dictatorial behavior. It has nothing to do with a free society.
So just to put a fine point on this, because given all of the heinous things we have said about the Clintons and Hillary in particular,
he talked about Hillary too.
Why
on the first part
does
of the podcast.
it matter that she be in charge as opposed to him? I mean, when you just imagine going forward in dealing with Russia or China or the problem of jihadism.
Okay, let me pause it here.
Any other challenge
this is going on for almost
face,
30
why
minutes.
do you feel that there really is a difference here worth carrying?
Okay,
I
so
was speaking with Ayaan Hirsi Ali.
oops, let me
Ayaan
pause
will
this.
Be known to many.
Okay, that's the Sam Harris podcast. That was the other. Okay, so they get into a little bit more. This was before the election. Now, he touched a little bit about the comparison. They didn't get it specifically. Again, what I would advise you people to do is first read that Vox article, the Holocaust historian, and then afterwards you could go on Amazon. There are, at least that I could think of off the top of my head, 4 really good scholarly books, and just go back and read. So again, this doesn't really. I'm doing this video in response to some text messages I received. Like some people think that I'm doing this just to be outrageous, to make these comparisons. I'm not doing that at all. Okay, people, it's 30 minutes in, or almost, and let me fade out with some beautiful Michael Hedges here. Thank you for watching, everyone. Here we go. Beautiful. Peace, love, and understanding. Good friends. Good books. And a sleepy conscience.